We're at the IAS meeting. We're here with Rick Nettles, with Jensen or Jensen, whichever you prefer. And it is a company that has been doing research for a number of years. And just give us a brief background on the start of it.
Absolutely. So the company was started as Tech, and then when it merged as part of a Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical part of Johnson & Johnson is referred to as Janssen, and so now instead of Tech, it's Janssen Infectious Diseases.
Gotcha. Okay. And the work you're working, the work that you do, your narrow focus is on resistance.
Right.
And that's been such a thing over the years. I mean, when we're talking about the past, I mean, we had to deal with so much, and so many of these drugs originally resistant to everything. Eventually, you couldn't use it. You know,
right.
It was gone. So, kind of cover that, step up to that, and then where we are today.
Sure. So, as a reminder, HIV drug resistance can develop when people living with HIV miss doses of medication, or there's a drug-drug interaction such that the drug levels fall below certain levels. And I'm sure the audience is very familiar with the phenomenon of HIV drug resistance. Darunavir, which is Prezista or Prescobix, was a medication that came from Janssen Infectious Diseases that was initially approved during a time when drug resistance was very common. So for individuals who needed a new regimen, Darunavir came at a time when there weren't many treatment options available. And so it really established itself as an option for patients who needed new therapy. Fortunately, in addition to being an option for patients who needed new therapy, it has a very high genetic barrier to resistance. So what we find in our clinical trials is when people fail on a Darunavir-based regimen, very often they fail with no drug resistance, which is a reassuring attribute of the drug.
Because I have to give you kudos, because I know that we worked with your, we meaning not IFARA, but the ATAC, AIDS Treatment Activists Coalition, as a community component, to understand where you were, input back and forth from the company and to us, and we helped to understand what the community's perspective was for you, and it really worked out well. I think we always did very well with everyone in the company trying to, I mean, most of the companies are pretty agreeable with it, but I think you guys were the leaders and helped us encourage other companies to say, hey, we need your help, we need your input. And one of the things that is kind of the difficult things for me is that we never were able to bring people from the pediatric and adolescent community. It was always kind of an afterthought. Okay, the drug, if it's available we can probably figure out a way to make it for the other formularies for the pediatric administration. And that wasn't always the case.
Right.
But I think it was always on our mind, and I mean on mine. I had to be the liaison to that. But resistance is different in populations. It's also different in male to female, and so we had to include as many people in the first studies as possible to get as far along with what it's approved for,
right,
before we go to phase 3, which is the next level of approval for other populations.
Right.
I don't know if you want to cover any of that.
Well, I agree, it's been a fantastic collaboration over the years between treatment advocates and Janssen, and the ATAC group specifically has given us advice consistently, and we've really appreciated that and taken it to heart. We have specifically tried to run clinical trials either where women are the sole enrolled population, or that have a sizable number of individuals as part of the participation, so it's not exclusively men, which are typically the easiest to enroll population. I agree with you, there are still unmet needs in the pediatric population, so finding new formulations that are either dissolvable or easier to swallow are going to be important. And then finally moving to an injectable-based long-acting regimen could be another option for populations that have a harder time swallowing pills. And then finally, to your point on drug resistance, we've just come up on the 10-year anniversary since the approval of Darunavir, believe it or not.
Yeah, I can imagine it's been that long.
And we've been working with companies like Monogram, who does the resistance testing in the US, to monitor how much resistance there are to protease inhibitors. And the good news is that in the US at least, resistance to protease inhibitors continues to decline. Again, speaking to the high genetic barrier to resistance that Darunavir has. And that's something that we're very proud of, and I think is a really good thing, that in the real world, challenge of darunavir, patients do not seem to be failing with drug resistance, which is wonderful.
I think each company, when they develop a formulation or a compound, there's usually a backup compound or two. I think you had the same thing going on. Do you do you feel that where you are is where, in hindsight, is always 2020, that you did the best you could with what you brought forward?
I think so, yeah. We still have some major milestones to move forward with. So darunavir currently is not available as a single tablet, and we're working through phase 3 trials called EMBER and EMERALD to have that data available hopefully later this year and file that with health authorities so that patients who really need a protease inhibitor could have a single tablet option. And then in our minds, the next stages of development are relatively big steps, looking at a fully injectable regimen, and then really transitioning to things like vaccines. So an HIV vaccine, obviously that's going to be very challenging, but that is where we think really the next stage that Janssen can begin to contribute for.
And I think most people think that all the companies are at odds with each other. And I don't think, there may be some of that, but for the most part, I think you all are working on the cure, especially, but there is proprietary concerns, of course. But you do work together, and you try to, okay, how about you understand what their drug is, and then you can say, well, this might be a good fit with a combination or...
Absolutely. So we certainly compete against the other companies, particularly Gilead and ViiV, but Janssen has established a reputation of when it makes sense for the patients, or it makes sense from the standpoint of trying to develop novel solutions, we will partner with those companies. We've partnered with Gilead, we've partnered with ViiV to develop combination tablets, and we would certainly do the same if we could develop vaccines or even going into a cure, functional cure.
Multivalent vaccine or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reason, I guess, for these meetings, is because you can talk off,
Exactly.
Informality.
Exactly.
Would be there to just chat with someone. And let's have more of a talk about that. Let's do an official talk.
Okay.
But the thing is, if you have that door opening, and you are collegial, and the way they're working with the Delaney Collaboratory on cure, it seems as though there's this sense of openness, which is very
Certainly.
exciting for the community. For me, being informed, but I think it's important for the community who's less well informed to also understand that as well. There's hope in you guys pulling something together that might be magic out of the hat, and we have a home run because two companies work together.
Yeah, certainly. We're very open to collaboration and happy to talk with you about that further at another time and location. And that door is certainly open for other companies, big or small. If they have good ideas to combine what we have, we're very open to those kind of talks.
I think ATAC's been always there, but we have to make sure we don't do anything inappropriate.
Yep.
But we make sure that we also do things that are going to, like you say, we're working together with you in a sense of coordination that is making sense for the people. That's where it's all about.
Exactly.
And ironically, not ironically, but realistically, when you're working for things that are good for the people, it's good for you.
Absolutely.
It's magical.
Absolutely.
It works. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Rick, to visit with us, and you're welcome always to sit down and chat more.
I appreciate
when
it.
there's a time that makes sense to do something, or other of your colleagues who can talk on another area of subject.
That sounds good.
Great.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.